Tell us, why are you in Norway right now?
So I'm here to meet with management teams, listed companies, advisors, other members of the capital markets community here in Norway to talk about U.S. investor access. It's my 6th time in Oslo. I enjoy coming here every time. And, over the years, we've been able to work with, some fantastic partners like a law firm, Rader Bing, SEB, Arctic Securities, Fearnleys. And in turn, we've been able to really grow kind of our Norwegian client base. When you look at the OTC markets, again, our kind of role is the largest stock market for non-US equities. There's over 12,000 securities that trade OTC. And we tier the market into 3, now 4 different marketplaces based on risk, size and scope of the company, levels of engagement or verified disclosure, different things like that. So as it stands today, there's probably about 40 or 50 Norwegian companies on the bottom market that we operate, which is called OTC Pink. And, if you're familiar with kind of the pink market, it's the pink sheets, for lack of a better term. That's where the penny stocks trade, the bankrupt companies, the dark delinquent filers, the risky securities like that. Many Norwegian companies don't either know they're there or don't understand why they're there. So for those Norwegian companies who do, want to desire greater U.S. investor access, I'm here to have educational conversations with them to talk about the risks, the opportunities, and things they can do to sort of better position themselves. And what I mean by that is, on the pink market, there's no engagement. So while you may have a U.S. ticker and maybe a foothold in terms of trading, there's not necessarily a flow of information to all the U.S. trade platforms and systems that investors utilize. So you could have a ticker symbol, but either have inaccurate or erroneous information associated with that ticker symbol. So if you look at kind of the hierarchy of our market, we have the next level up, the OTCQB venture market. So that's for smaller kind of growth companies. It's akin to, say, Euronext Growth or any of the junior exchanges in Europe. And then we have our top tier market called OTCQX. And on OTCQX, you'd recognize names like Roche, Adidas, Heineken, BASF, global leaders right like that. From Norway, 3 of the 5 largest companies all trade on OTCQX. So Aker BP, Telenor, Norsk Hydro. So for many companies, exploring going to QB or QX could be a great opportunity. And then additionally, launching this summer, we have a new market called OTCID. And that's really a baseline reporting and disclosure market to allow companies to take ownership of their trading, eliminate that kind of pink sheets branding, and make sure that their information is on the right systems and platforms that U.S. investors utilize.
What makes you ready to move up the ranks? Is it, regulation, size of the company? You mentioned Aker BP, a huge company, of course, Telenor as well. Is it the size, the market cap, or can management do some adjustments and then they can onboard the next level?
Yeah, so there's certainly qualitative and quantitative standards for QB and QX. But I think the big thing is whether you're a large company or a small company, there's a couple of themes for the companies who do execute, the list local, trade global strategy where it makes sense. I would say theme number 1 would be, do you have U.S. operations, U.S. employees, growth targets, U.S. revenues, etc. And having kind of that U.S. connection allows you to sort of link the commercial success to the equity story and kind of tie it all together. The other bucket would be sort of the national champions of the home country. So think things like banks, telecom, infrastructure. And we see that here in Norway, really kind of the flag flyers of the home country.
Okay, so a big question. What are sort of the biggest trends in US capital markets?
Maybe a bit multi-layered, but it's an interesting question nonetheless. I mean, obviously we have a new administration, you read the news in the morning, you come back at lunch, and the news is totally different, right? But what we're witnessing right now in real time is there's almost this kind of rotation from US investors out of US stocks into European stocks. And we see that in our trading volumes. Again, given the role that we play as the largest stock market for non-US equities, majority of our volumes are in foreign or non-US names. So I think, European companies who are tradable, telling the story effectively, executing on the business plan, are certainly in a good position to kind of capture this attention from US investors. And, not to mention the historic valuation gaps between European companies and US companies, the European equity will have a place in the US portfolio.
So if I'm involved with a company and I'm giving you a call, said I want to enter the US market, I'm looking at the stock exchange, your response will be, don't do it. There's a simpler route.
Well, there's definitely a simpler route. And look, the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ, they're great at what they do. And when you sort of think about your options, the solution that we provide and the fact that we can use this 12G 32B exemption, where you can just copy and paste your Norwegian disclosures as long as it's in English, it really does provide a streamlined way to get US public market access and to ensure that, your share now has the same look and feel as any other US security. So when it comes to kind of evaluating, okay, do I need to be, duplicative in my accounting standards? Do I need to be duplicative in my regulatory requirements? It can start to get pretty expensive and costly real quick. But, look, we're proud of the role that we serve in the US capital markets. And, every day we're excited to connect the US investor to Norway and vice versa.
Definitely. Are there any sectors that has been super strong in your databases and your trends that has piqued interest?
Great question. I don't know. I think it's more sort of at a macro level. Much like I described earlier, kind of the European valuation gap is a big pain point that we help our clients solve. So, if you're listed here in Europe, now having a presence in the US is a great way to kind of close that gap. And also, when you think about the industries that Norway is famous for, whether it's, oil and gas or fish farming or what have you, those are always going to be relevant topics. But what I think has been a very interesting trend over recent years is, the Nordics, and particularly in Norway, like leaders in biotech, leaders in renewables, leaders in other sort of cutting edge technologies. Those all are always kind of high growth stories that the US investor appreciates.
Definitely. So another trend that I guess is more US specific, but I still want to ask you about it since you're involved in the finance markets, is the trend of being a private company for much longer. Maybe it's a Silicon Valley thing, but is that something discussed a lot in US, that companies don't want listings, they want to stay private because the capital is so huge?
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about sort of the public markets is the democratization of information, right? And whether the IPO window is closed or not, we're starting to see green shoots of activity, where more companies are coming to the market. So it's all kind of dependent on, what the company strategy and cap table looks like. But I think once you are public, whenever you decide to take that journey, maximizing your exposure to as many different investors and investment accounts possible is always a great, opportunity for success. And if you couple that with, the appropriate levels of compliance and, getting the information out there and being transparent in your disclosure, you're now taking the steps of general good best practice of corporate citizenry.
Makes sense. So now you've been to Norway several times. What's your favorite thing about Norway?
Well, I came here in June one time and I played golf after work. So we teed off at like 5:30 and we finished up around 10 and the sun was still shining. Never in my life has that happened before. So coming here in June, very good time. I'd like to experience that again.
Perfect ending, Joe. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure to host you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.